Okay, guys. So basically, what I want to go through is we just did a video about whether or not we should tax essentially the benefits or the income of those on SSI at the FICA rate when they essentially go ahead and try to work. And I think that was a brilliant move. I think that was a really great idea because normally they wouldn't get taxed because they just wouldn't earn enough because they'd be on SSI and they just wouldn't be earning much on top of it. But if they were to pay taxes, right, on that 4 quarters of coverage, that $6,560 for the total of essentially 4 quarters of coverage earned, then what that equates to, and the quarter of coverage for 2023 would have been $1,640. What that equates to is a situation where they would end up paying into the trust funds, and that would be super duper helpful for them. Now, the problem I foresee with this idea is that there's a transitional part of it. And that's when they're going from SSI to SSDI benefits. And, they don't have enough quarters of coverage paid in, enough income, and their averaging algorithm makes them do a hybrid program, which there's a fix for that. But in this video, what I want to look at, that's an idea that could work for Biden. But in this video, I want to ask you guys, all right, so where do you stand on this thing when it comes to Biden's White House, when it comes to essentially, you know, Vice President Harris with Social Security benefits? Now, when you look at structurally how they've been doing, right, you have to look at Commissioner Kijikazi, who's been very active. She's been active with basically, trying to go ahead and increase the amount that's paid to the attorneys to get attorneys to represent them because, attorneys were falling off, constantly with not wanting to represent disabled people because there was just no money in it. And so there was a slight increase there, which is good. There have been more pro-claimant activities. Not all of them have been pushed through. Not all of them have been put into the procedural booklet, but there have been a lot of amazing things happening. But if we look at this thing as more of a generalized structure, right, a general understanding, we have to then ask ourselves, are we happy with President Biden? Would a different candidate, whether a Republican or a Democrat, be useful in this instance to go ahead and be better for Social Security benefits? And who would you potentially choose for, that potential seat? Because it's got to be somebody who's got a lot of, a big name approach, which is none of the people pushing Social Security benefits in the Democratic or Republican Party. And so you have to have somebody who really can be elected. And aside from just this identity of Biden versus Trump, because that's what it's really coming down to, and I've seen the arguments made, you have essentially on one side of the table, the Democrat side, the MSNBC, the CBS, the NBC, those types of news groups usually present that, Trump's going to be arrested and that, Trump's can't run in 2024 and blah, 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 blah. None of that stuff is going to happen. He's going to run in 2024. He's going to be, the main party person for the Republican Party. So if you have this expectation that there's no way he's going to run, it's your news stations are wrong. They're just wrong. Okay. They've been wrong now for basically the entire Trump existence in politics, and also the entire Trump existence in politics after he was, out of office during the 2 years of Biden. So then I look to you and I say, okay, we know that Trump isn't the best potential option for essentially, Social Security benefits because he put in Commissioner Saul, who is very negative, very anti-claimant, the big things that changed were massive and they harmed significantly people's ability to get onto disability benefits, like changing the rule pertaining to essentially, pertaining to how evidence, how the weight of it is computed against other evidence. And what happened was when you had like a specific doctor that was a specialist that you would go see, the reduction of evidence, it used to be that was like worth a lot more than this one-time doctor they would send you to. And then they changed the rules so that these two doctors would have somewhat equivalent standing in an adjudication in a courtroom, which is not fair because you could have been seeing your doctor over and over and over again. You could have had that doctor really do some really incredible tests. And then basically they compare that doctor's evidence against this other doctor that the SSA sent you to once. And now all of a sudden this one doctor has sometimes equivalent worth to your doctor over here. So it was extreme anti-claimant stuff. And that was the Trump party. That was the Trump's Social Security administration. That was that. And a lot of people, you have people who love Trump who would say, "Oh, you'd never do anything wrong to the Social Security system." He did. And then you have people who love Biden who would say Biden would never do anything wrong to the Social Security system, but he did. So what this kind of comes down to is I'm trying to gauge from you guys essentially what your feelings are, when it comes to essentially this idea, this structural idea of, do you feel that we're moving in the right direction, and what do you think needs the most fixing first? Now, I've thought about this a little bit, and I've been trying myself to kind of come to the reality of where things are at. In mediation, what we do is we walk up these stairs, open a window, and look down as if we're trying to look down on what's going on in front of us to see specifically both sides of the argument, being on top of the battlefield, looking down and trying to understand what's really happening. And, there are some things that I just want to point out to help us kind of open this conversation up to have a better understanding of, do we give Biden's administration for Social Security benefits a 1 star? Do we give him a 5 star? Do we give him a 2 star, a 4 star, a 3 star? Where do we put that rating system? So some of the things that I've been thinking about with this is that, at the end of the year, some of the most strong abuse, some of the most horrific abuse that we've seen with the cost of living adjustment that hurts people, like people not getting as much as they need per year, occurred during the Biden era, right? Because we had massive inflation. It was largely due in part to COLA and then mishandling of what happens with oil. And so Social Security recipients really got hammered. I mean, totally and completely and utterly hammered by not getting enough of what they were supposed to get for the next year. Because every time we have a high cost of living adjustment number, that means that you're actually losing more money, which is weird. They don't sell it like that on YouTube channels that are super famous because they sell the whole hope spiel, the blind billionaire, yada, yada. But the reality is this: the more inflation that occurs, the worse off you are, because the amount that they give you the next year in a raise is always less than the inflation. And the more inflation that there is, the less that you get into the next year to combat it. So basically, we're in the Jimmy Carter era of hurting your Social Security benefits, where you're just not getting enough per year. So where is that on the spectrum of how bad Commissioner Saul and Trump was versus how bad the Biden, Commissioner Kijikazi group are? There's another thing too, is that when you kind of look at this whole structural thing and you stand back, you have to look and say, okay, were these civil rights groups really effective that were part of this Trump era, that were part of this kind of like entrance of the Biden era? When you think back to Antifa, I mean, they've pretty much been disbanded for the most part. Nobody hears about them. Nobody sees anything. There's no more courthouses getting, lit ablaze and things like that. So, you look back and you go, okay, so this was a political game that was played. And it unfortunately was not a good one, because at the end of the day, if this was something real that people felt really strongly about, like what Antifa stood for, then they would have continued to see all of these, black shirts, throwing things at windows kind of people, even into the Biden era. Because, many of you guys don't realize that the Antifa group does not support Republicans. They also don't support Democrats as well. They are, basically this full socialism, communist, entity of, anti-government. So the problem that we run into is that was a political machine, unfortunately. And when I look at that, I think that actually to some degree hurt those on Social Security benefits, because it put a negative light on the word socialism and the idea of a social help program, which is what retirement benefits are to some degree. It's what SSDI benefits are. It's what SSI benefits are. And they're all in some way different. Somebody will say, well, I paid for my retirement benefits. And that is true. But the whole collection of those funds to be distributed, whether it's to you or your family members in their time of need, or when you can retire or you're disabled, that is a social form of a government program, right? That's definitely within the definition of socialism. So then I think about like these Black Lives Matters groups, right, which are now to some degree defunct. You don't see them in the news. You don't see them doing massive events or all these big things anymore. And there's all these things coming out about the use of funds and millions and millions of dollars basically disappearing. Again, I think that hurt Social Security benefits. I think it hurts Social Security benefits because at the end of the day, the way that you create a successful movement pertaining to essentially race is by having a particular race help other races. And the way you do that is by having that other race donate a portion of their time to help other people, which changes how people see that race that wants to have a new image and wants to have police, treat them differently, yada, 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 and so on and so forth. And I think what was interesting is that I don't think we'll ever see another Black Lives Matter movement like that because, there's so many wealthy Black individuals. There's a president who is Black. There's a lot of leaders in Congress that are Black. There's a lot of rules and regulations that support African Americans, with academia, and the student loans aren't nearly as bad as they are for other people. So I don't think we'll ever see something like that ever again because it's just, it would not match up with the theme of what America has become at this point. And as a result of that, now we're starting to see kind of a movement / waiver where people basically look at it and say, okay, well, should we still have for academia entrance situations that are based off of, potentially race? Like, what is the color of that person's skin? Do we give them extra points and allow them to enter the school as a result of this? Or do we make it more regional based? Like, do the schools really want students who are from different countries coming to America, getting educated in America, etc., no matter what color their skin is? So, having people from Africa, whether they have, white, Black, brown, whatever skin color, etc. So that's really, with the Supreme Court, something that's interesting that they're going through. And I think what's happening is people have gotten to this point where they're starting to realize all the games that politicians are playing. When you look back in time, you look at for example, Nixon or some of these other really famous presidents when it comes to scams, if you will, that might have been employed or used or whatever. You kind of have to look at essentially the future forward version of that as to, are people seeing the abuse? Are people seeing how they are getting used? There were arguments in the past where, if we made them nowadays, they would just be people would ignore them. They would know it's a false flag, or they would know that it's like a magic trick to make you look this way when something else is going on that way. And what we used to all call these conspiracy theorists, it's like with Elon coming out and now owning Twitter, and he showed us these documents from their group. And I'm sure these are the only ones that are left over, but he showed us the documents proving each thing that basically everybody said was probably going on. What I think really hurts Social Security is that all these games keep getting played by these political providers. That's how I think of them, as literally providers. Each political group that goes into the White House is like their own insurance. It's like its own hospital, its own big entity. It's its own film series. Some people are into Star Wars, some people are into Star Trek, some people are into the Marvel universe, some people are into the DC universe, all that stuff. It's its own major entity. It's its own major thing. And so as a result of that, I don't think we have reached the point as a country where we have gotten control as a people to get beyond the mass mental playground that has been plaguing us. As you know, all the news stations, whether it's from Fox News to anyone on CNN or NBC, all of those different groups are, for the most part, essentially losing this power that they had over everybody just watching TV. Because remember, TV, we first started to just, read books, then we would watch or listen to the radio, then we would watch the TV. And that's how we would get our source of information. I'm sure there were newspapers, but the TV obviously beat out the newspapers. And now that TV is ending, YouTube and other online video, posting areas have become this new thing that we want to be a part of and understand and watch. And yes, bias is very strong, absolutely, on YouTube. But I think the main difference between YouTube and these legacy news channels is that you are, capable of very easily seeing a lot of different opinions. Because when you look up a particular thing, like, about this topic or that topic, YouTube will usually shove in there a couple of videos that go this way or that way or this way or that way with their opinions as to what's going on. But at the end of the day, what we have now are essentially experts, which are usually the people who shoulda, coulda, would have been on TV, but they just weren't, or the young upcoming people who essentially, are the new voices replacing the old actors that were on these legacy news channels. And as a result of that, we have this really cool thing going on. I love the distrust. I absolutely adore the distrust. And let me explain why. People used to think, we went through this phase where, like, well, everybody that thinks that, the science isn't there, or anybody that thinks that this isn't right, or anybody that thinks that blah, 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 well, they're just some weird, theory, wearing a tinfoil hat, whatever person. I love the distrust. I think the distrust is actually healthy. Distrust in law is one of the most important things that we can use as a tool to get to the truth. If you automatically trust one thing as the definitive, as the infinite, as the only option that there is, you'll always end up in the wrong place because you have too many factors that are already just decided, right? There's too many hard physics laws that you just say these are it. There could never be anything else. And then string theory came along, and then quantum theory came along and changed everything in science. So let me give you an example of that. When people, basically, okay, so you saw like the whole Hunter Biden laptop thing and how that blew up. And I remember talking with my friends who are not the questioning type, who did not question what was going on. And they said, no matter what, whatever's on the laptop, it's not real. Neener, neener, neener. I don't believe it, yada, yada, yada. Me, I went into the torrents, I went into the system, I pulled the file, and I looked at the stuff, and it was, oh wow, Gatita Oso, thank you, thank you, thank you for the $10 donation. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, thank you. So what happened was I pulled up the files that I could get on the laptop, and basically, I saw the images, I saw what was going on with Hunter, and I sat back and I thought to myself, okay, but everybody's got some wild kids, right? Everybody's got some kid that's doing something that they shouldn't be doing. I know when I was younger, I had a very good time in college. I know when other people were younger, they did stupid things that they weren't supposed to. Obviously, the Hunter laptop situation, that's not a kid, but we know that he's had issues and he's been battling drugs and he's been battling cigarettes and he's been battling all these things that have equated to him doing some terrible things. Then the information came out essentially about the connection between, funds and then trading of information and preferential treatment for corporations that might be caught doing something they shouldn't be doing. And then things got a little bit hairy. What happened to me during that period was, that's a big story unto itself, and the video is not about that. But what happened to me was that I learned that people become too invested into what they believe. They become too invested into essentially what they believe. And I need you to understand this. If you look at something that is even stronger than politics, like when people have opinions about politics, it's strong. It's like a 7 out of 10. They get angry, but it's not as strong as people's reaction or interaction with, for example, basically religion. So one of the things, I'm just going to turn this light a little bit. One of the things that you have to keep in mind when it comes to religion is that religion can basically dictate somebody's actions based off of what the religion tells them to do. So one of the things that I think is very interesting, and I come from a very different background than most people. Most people have like one religion that dictates to them what their life should be. I didn't start with that. I had a Jewish mom and a Christian dad. So I had the two religions, which work very well because they're a timeline group, right? Judaism and most of the text in the context basically comes before the extension of Judaism, which is then the Christian religion, right? The formation of Jesus related texts, etc. But still, I am very aware of what other religions have historically going on, what their teachings are, etc. And the one thing that I think is incredibly important is that when you study, for example, what a Buddha would think, you know, when people look at this, somebody who studies, the Buddhist ideology, they're not sitting there going, Jesus is number one. They're not, because that to them would be ridiculousness, right? It would just be completely and utterly ridiculous. They're studying essentially a religion that teaches them completely different doctrinal theories than Christianity, than the Muslim, origin theories, all of them. And so as a result of that, what you end up with is people having these fundamental structured ideas based off of religion and then trying to apply it to how these politicians should be acting. Because let's call it like it is. Religion, is a moral structure. It's what you should live by in the sense of, these morals, ethics, choices based usually off of story learning, which is, in my opinion, the best way to learn, but it's the best way to remember things too. Other than kinesthetic learning, which is like touching learning, where you touch something and then you learn, okay, well, this thing is sharp, this thing is not sharp, this thing is hot, this thing is not hot. Stories are like, throughout history, the best way for the human intellect to go ahead and retain and then continue on knowledge. So what I think about is that we tend to have this bad job of using religion to define what our politicians should be. And then our politicians, knowing that we want certain things from them, from religion, try to cater and change how they are and what they want to do based off of those things. That can either increase or decrease their ability to complete a task. What I think is interesting is that when we look at, President Biden and Social Security, he promised a lot of things and delivered on very few. He did give us Commissioner Kijikazi, who's making a lot of changes, which are awesome. But the really big stuff, not just the administrative, how do we procedurally, process this stuff, but the big stuff, the increasing the benefits, reducing, the restrictions, like the marriage penalty rule, the in-kind support maintenance rule, whatever. The big stuff hasn't been touched at all. Hasn't been touched at all. And so what upsets me about that is that when I came into this equation, Biden was supposed to be the de facto absolute pro Social Security, person that could actually potentially win. But he hasn't delivered. And he's almost certainly not going to deliver into 2023 and 2024 because he can't deliver at this point because there's no budgeting for them. The money isn't there that's been budgeted for these particular years that are part of his presidency. So then the only option that's left is second term, we're going to put Social Security benefits in the budget for 2025, yada, yada, yada. That's basically his only remaining choice, his only token to put on the playing field, the board, if you will, to get people to continue to vote for him from Social Security benefits. So when I ask you guys, like, what do you think about him? Like, where do you stand with this guy? What do you think about this particular guy? My point is this. I don't think he was able to deliver. And I don't think he's of the age, religion, the financial standing, because remember, he's a multi-millionaire. I'm not getting into how he made the money, but the point is, he doesn't come from where we come from, where we're constantly oppressed. I've got student loans barking at my butt. I'm trying to keep my mortgage rolling. I'm trying to get an investment going so that I have something to keep me going because retirement's not going to be there in the same way when I'm your age. So the problem is I look at this thing and I tell myself, okay, who do I put in office? And I know Trump doesn't support Social Security benefits, which is weird. It's weird. It's really weird because, the military is very pro-Trump, right? Christianity, very pro-Trump. When it comes to the economy is very pro-Trump. The taxation system, not getting into that, very pro-Trump. The system structure when it comes to essentially immigration it was just better under Trump. Like you can argue one thing or the other, but it's just better under Trump. But then you have to ask yourself, okay, how do you get a guy like that convinced to support Social Security benefits? Oh, wow. Marjan, I don't love Biden, but I don't want another 45. $1.99 donation. Thank you. Thank you so much for the $1.99 donation. I really, really appreciate it. So you hit on my point, which is right there, which is I feel like with this two-party system, we're stuck with either like, aggressive Trump or didn't really deliver Biden. And if we look at like the two alternative options, which one might go for it, one might not. And you never know. Like it could be 3 months out from an actual election. One of them could get sick. They're old guys. Trump is old. Biden's old. They're both old guys. So you never know if you might get a California governor or a Florida governor or things like that running up to, compete, yada, yada. You never know. You never know what's going to happen. So, and I know what you would say. Well, then the VP would step in, blah, blah, blah. But the point is this. Do you guys have anyone in mind that you really like? And the reasons for it? And are those reasons based on true foundational knowledge? Because what I've seen is that women hated Trump because, he was a very, chauvinistic, machismo type of guy. And that turned a lot of women off on him. And I get it because women are in the empowerment stage of America, right? Every Disney movie that comes out there, there's the queens are the empowered figure, And I think that's really good because, obviously all the movies that came out in the past, the males were the empowered individual. So I think that's really good, especially since women they have it harder. They have to be sexy, have kids, be a professional, make money, all these, it's just an impossible standard to go by. So at the end of the day, if not something like that, we know we need some basic things. We know that we need somebody who can control the border. We know that we need somebody who can go ahead and basically fix the economy, because any more out of these world crazy inflation years, and it just hurts Social Security benefits at a really big level. So when I look at like the classic people who are preparing, these bills to fix SSI, Social Security 2100 Act, Supplemental Security Income Restoration, all these types of bills that were presented, and then they changed the name and put it under a different politician. Those people who really first launched those fixed Social Security programs or bills, rather, none of them can get elected. They're just not popular enough on a national level. And I was thinking about this too. When I say they're not popular enough on a national level, it's the same idea of reaching people that you see in the difference between Marvel movies and DC movies. Marvel movies, you have like, Iron Man, stuff like that. DC movies, you have like Superman. Now, obviously, Superman should have beat out Iron Man any day, any day. The comics of Superman should have beat out Iron Man in every single hypothetical that could be contemplated. But it didn't. So then you have to wonder, what was the magic of Iron Man to reach that population, to become a national sensation, as opposed to just small regional or small niche or small, almost like cult culture, specific desires, right? Because that's what happened in DC. It was just the small niches were actually watching it, which is what, the whole Black Adam thing got caught up in, etc. So what I think is what's happening now is that we're running into this really tricky situation where, all right, if I say this to you, it's going to be a little bit out there, and I get this, but when we look at essentially our elderly population, there's a problem with education where the youth don't understand why they have to pay for this retirement for them, because the retirement's not going to be there for them. There's an issue where the retired don't really understand the rules of why their retirement is paying out so much little or so much less each year, right? So education across the board is important. We got to educate young people. We've got to educate old people on how the system actually works so that they can start changing it to their benefit. But there's not enough time to fix retirement within that 10 to 15-year period, which means we need politicians to change the rules to culturally deliver a change that benefits the retired. What I just said there was complex. Let me try and skim it down. And this is the last theory I want to go out with. When you look at essentially the time it takes to culturally change the United States, okay, so let's think about that. How much time did it take? How much time did it take to culturally change the United States so that we knew slavery was wrong across the country? Okay, or at least the 99 percentage believe it's wrong and know it's wrong, right? How long did it take to culturally change America so that women should be able to vote, right? Women should be able to vote. So that women should be able to have the option of, in a divorce, receiving the children if it's within the children's best interest. Okay, what about changing the culture of basically America from gasoline-related cars to the potential of having, electric vehicles in the future? What about changing the culture of essentially, the retired, being able to have, significantly more money so that it is almost like the great gift of working hard in America, so that you look forward to it, so that it's like achieving this angelic, heaven like existence once you reach a certain age? How long does it take for these different types of culture to really take off? And that's the problem we have here, is that we don't have enough time to fix the culture of how Americans view retirement or disability benefits. We don't have enough time. We don't. We don't. We just don't. Especially for retirement, because retirement, the trust fund's going to run out, and then we're shit out of luck. It's then whatever people pay in is whatever gets paid out. That's it, and it's on a continuous downward spiral. Because remember, 2020, 2021. The trust fund started to, it didn't make money. It lost money. So the thing that we have to do is we have to pick out politicians that get the long-term image of what America is supposed to look like. And we have to get them essentially to do what nobody's going to want to do, which is prepare the United States in this long-term, timeline vision to make hard choices. I present all this information to you because if we do not look at retirement as in itself a form of the benefit of that religion, right? Heaven is the benefit of Christianity as you know God, right? It is the ultimate, you have achieved a higher standing. You get to go to a place that is, the fountain of happiness and you'll never need, etc. Retirement has lost that. And if we can't change the culture back to that, then the purpose of people paying for it, my generation and younger, they're not going to pay for it. I'm just telling you ahead of time. They're just not going to. There's almost 100 million people on Medicaid. A lot of the chunk of that is from the whole COVID system. But my generation and future generations thereafter are working less and less because there's no incentive downfield to go ahead and tap into. There's no promise of Gatorade after you do that last run on the field with the soccer ball. There's no promise of a date with a pretty girl if you don't make that touchdown. There's no promise downfield. And so we have to pick somebody who is going to make that promise a reality. Now, with that said, when I listen to the speeches of Biden versus Trump, Biden's Social Security speeches are really incredible. They're really incredible. It is sad that they're all generalized statements with no definitive character as to where the hell the thing is going and what he intends to do with it. So one of the things I would like to promote, and then I'm going to do the next video, is that when it comes to his ability, whoever it is, or her ability, my apologies, her ability, whoever it is in the future who could potentially right this situation, right this Social Security problem, they have to be able to find what it is that's going to make people want to actually get back to work. In my opinion, all the people who are on disability benefits who want to do part-time, I want to change the system to benefit them to work and pay taxes into the Social Security Trust Fund system. Like with the SSI people, I just did that other video. Normally, you wouldn't get taxed if you earn a little bit here and there, but I want to do a thing where we take away that thing that, basically restricts them from going forward and working, because with SSI, ain't nobody going to work if every dollar gets taken away from $2 that you earn above the first $20 plus 65 that you earn for the month. Ain't nobody going to work. But if we got rid of that rule for the first 4 quarters of coverage, quarter coverage 1,640 per month, 4 quarters of coverage is 6,560 for the first 6,560 bucks that you earn. But we tax it. We tax those SSI people at the 12.4% for that. Then, you're getting them off of SSI. And that's all built on this idea. The dream is to not be on SSI. Whether you're a guy who fixed motorcycles in your backyard and never paid into the system, or you're somebody who always worked under the table at an Italian restaurant, or you're, a wife that didn't have to work, but now is in this like terrible, oh my God, what do I do situation because my husband divorced me and my parents don't have enough money to keep me as their, keeper to keep up the whatever. We could fix this, but we don't have a politician. And I don't even know of a single one that would do it. So, anyways, guys, I just looked at the comments. I see Civil War. The promise they always lie for their own profits. I don't disagree with that. I would say this too, and one of them just pointed out a thing about the Ticket to Work program. The SSA gets to really choose in part whether or not that company gets joined into the Ticket to Work program. So there's that huge limitation. Like if we could carve out the Ticket to Work. Oh, wow. Storm Cop 55. Thank you so much for the $10 donation. That's really, really supportive and amazing. So David Gray is with a saucy comment said, I think the younger generation just likes to complain about everything. But once again, keep in mind, the most viewed and subscribed to disability attorney in America on YouTube, the more 5 stars than any other single practitioner or disability attorney in America, a guy who works all day, every night. I am the oldest of the old millennials. Like I'm in the oldest category because of my age. And I would say this, so just to the point of that, David, I actually think you're right. And that is their best talent. And I know you're going to try and shoot me down over this, but David Gray, can you tell me what the point of attorneys is? The point of attorneys is to go ahead and complain and bitch about what the law is, or when something bad happened to somebody within a legal framework. What I want to do is educate the youth so that they can bitch and complain within a framework that actually matters. When you see these like Antifa groups and things like that existed during the Trump era doing their thing, right? That was the wrong way to do it to get results. So I think actually one of the best, and a lot of people hate it, I think one of the best aspects of the millennials and the Gen Zs and stuff like that is they're complaining and they're bitching and they're whining. Think about it. If everybody was just cool with what the government was doing and didn't complain or bitch, then nothing would change. It would only get worse. Marjan, can you do the class action lawsuit on Social Security? I'll do an update specifically on that, but basically we're setting up a fund through a trust fund to go ahead and allow people to donate to go ahead and do this class action for the COLA. I don't have enough time to do the COLA class action lawsuit, which is the cost of living adjustment lawsuit. I've started to collect people who can be part of it, the experts, and that's important. You've got to have experts that can do the mathematics to show basically a decline in benefits worth over a particular matter of time, so that people are getting less and less each year as a result of the cost of living adjustment not fairly articulating what the actual cost of that inflation ended up being. I don't have enough time to do it. Now, if I sold my law firm one day, yeah, I would have time to do it. I would just start another entity specifically with the purpose of doing that. I did speak with two other attorneys about basically what their thoughts are on doing it, and they were for it. But the problem is the cost is very prohibitive. It's very, very prohibitive of doing something of that size. When people advertise like the biggest law firm or more attorneys than anybody else, what they're not telling you is that their overhead is ridiculous, like absolutely obnoxiously ridiculous. So they have to constantly pay for this massive amount of payroll, all the rental of all the buildings, all of the electricity and the internet and the phone systems and the this and that. They have to constantly make money. And if this is something where they see that it's got real potential to make money, but it's going to take 7 to 10 years to litigate it through all the appeals, they're probably not going to do it. They're probably not going to do it. And that's the problem that I'm running into, is that people are afraid of the timeline of doing something this big, because it would be one of the largest lawsuits in the history of the past 100 years. So how much is the cost to do a lawsuit like that? I'd probably put it at somewhere around, I'd say probably around 300,000 on the low end. Like if you did it on the cheap, between all the experts and the time to do it. If you put it on like the big payroll, like the big attorneys and what they expect to get paid, you're at probably 1 to 2 million starting, maybe up to 3 to 4 million to keep it rolling through all the appeals. But they make significantly more than I do, and I'm not used to that kind of money, so but that's a very different world. That's a very large, massive money machine, which is personal injury. Like if you're wondering which groups make the most money in law, it's personal injury. Those guys make tons and tons of funds. Disability attorneys don't make much at all. I see Deb Carter said, "Holy smokes." Yeah, no, it's a lot of money. Like that's one of the things that when I say to you guys, like, hey, we could make this happen, on a cheaper budget of like $200,000 to $300,000, people are like, what? What do you mean? Like, how could that and and that's if the attorneys don't get that much. They're just getting like what it costs to keep things rolling and the basic hourly of them to do stuff. Like that's not like the big, if the big attorneys were like in the spotlight stuff, that's not that kind of money. That's one of the things people don't realize. Like, you want to pave that road for the county, mega money. You want to build that bathroom in the park, millions of dollars. It's just the cost of things is just so incredibly stupid at this point. But okay, so let's see. No, I don't think 3 million to keep it going. I think if you had big named attorneys that were expecting a payout from this thing, like they were pushing an agenda where they wanted to go ahead and make a lot of money off of just this lawsuit. And, my thing is this is the whole purpose of this lawsuit is not to make money as an attorney. The whole purpose of the lawsuit is to get the cost of living adjustment back on track. So, if you had enough money to fund all the experts, traveling fees to go to the different courts, the food fees, writing the brief fees, writing the motions, the responses, the filings, all that stuff. That'd probably be over the expanse of, let's say 7 to 8 years. There'd probably be somewhere between $250,000, $300,000, because remember, these experts aren't going to come and do their thing unless you pay them, for an expert to come in on a mathematical thing to write up a motion. You're looking at like base of 10 grand, like base. That's like, and some of these guys, if they had a real name behind them, you're talking 15 to 50 grand to have them come in and give a report and then testify in court. It's not, if you're talking about somebody who's famous, 35 grand, that's a chunk of that 300. And you got to make that span over, 7, 8, maybe 9 years. So, that's just something that you should consider, like, as to, what's going on and how it works. It's not, So Marjan, basically the idea is this: I'm getting people together, we're getting the trust fund together, and once the trust fund is set up, it's just going to be, an account where people can log in and see how much has been donated. And the whole point is that basically we have to get funds together, not the full amount of funds. We don't need the 200, $300,000 right up front. But I was thinking we should at least get 50 grand in there to go ahead and use as something to get. Look, my dream is multiple firms. I know that that's not the common thing for usual claims, but the reality is this: you would need multiple firms to come together to make a lawsuit this big actually work. And here's why: you can't expect one firm for 8 years to just constantly pay out, work towards, do this, or pay for some attorney at the firm to constantly work on it and push it, etc., without having some sort of massive financial problem. Because that's just, to pay for an attorney for that length of time without backing, it just won't work. But if you had multiple firms on board, like a coalition of law firms that could basically all share in the work to some degree, it would work a lot better. It would work a lot better. So my goal is to get multiple firms online with this thing. And, my push, my idea with this is that essentially, if we can get multiple firms and we can have 3 to 4 experts of each category that we need, and there's like 4 categories of math that we need just for something like this. But if we can get all of those lined up, we could potentially make this happen. Now, the problem is the government, a lot of you think, is just going to be like overwhelmed. What do we do? They're not. The government has a team of attorneys specifically set up with the Office of Inspector General and the Social Security Administration and all these different groups. And then there's attorneys on behalf of, the president, because this is something that would rise to the level of naming the president, um, who would all be battling and writing against this. They would, as far as the war chest goes, very likely and very quickly outgun us in the sense of what kind of money we had versus what kind of legal team we could get together. And a lot of people think, well, just have the attorneys work nonstop. The attorneys have to make money to go ahead and do this stuff. So if we don't have a base fund for them to pull from, just to be able to feed the attorneys for the extra time that they donate and pay these specialists who come in and give testimony that can be used as a battle of the experts, then we're not going to succeed. And the worst thing we can do is start a claim that we do poorly, which then creates law through a decision that ends up hurting us in the long run. That is de facto the worst thing that we could possibly do. So this has to be one of those things where we line everything up ahead of time and we're solved as a result of it. So that's what's going on here. The bottom line is people don't realize how big this lawsuit would be. This lawsuit, the cost of living adjustment lawsuit, would be a fundamental case in many law student books. It would be financially the most costly claim, probably to the United States government, over the past 50 years, maybe even 100 years. Because if you knew, and I had a buddy do some basic math for me, and it scared me. It was so massive. If you knew how much money you did not have that was taken from you over just a 22-year period from 2000, you would be livid. But the cost of that amount of money is prohibitive to the government because they can't afford it. And that's why when I say to you guys, and the whole purpose of this video is, what do you guys think of Biden? What do you think of Trump? What do you think about any alternatives? Where do we go? Yada, yada. What I'm saying to you really is, we're going to need some politicians who want to not just change the culture through education, but also understand that for Social Security to pay out what it's supposed to pay out, for it to do what it's supposed to do, for it to be that heaven that people look forward to at the end of their days, for it to be something that inspires human beings to work their butt off. Well, that's unfortunately something that I think is to some degree a bit of a pipe dream, because we don't have a good setup yet. In order to do this, you would need the backing of the people. Now, let's say that this channel had like 1 million people that were subscribers, and I could reach out and give law to like 1 million people or whatever, right? Let's say that we had that. If we had something like that, we could, to some degree, reach enough voters to actually place a candidate on, the voter, system, where, basically it would become a presidential potential. We could place enough House reps and enough senators, but still it wouldn't be enough. It still wouldn't be enough, because think about it. We have to compete against multi-billion-dollar corporations that are essentially hyperfunding the political careers of those who align with their agendas. So if you think competing legally with, 50 grand to fix the largest potential cost of living adjustment, it's to some degree insurmountable. And the politicians know that. The politicians know that. They really do. They really do, because they know that they have you guys right where they need you, and that they can continue to just slowly lower the amount you get each year through these averaging algorithms. And so if it can't be fought and won, then it will never happen. And if people aren't educated on why it should happen, with the emphasis of the belief that they'll achieve that heaven-like existence in America, then there's no incentive to go ahead and achieve it. To put it fairly, there are some hurdles, and they are massive. And the problem with these hurdles, so love pugs, like, and I see what you wrote here. What if you get an honest politician to help? There has to be at least one out there. Wow, Leanne. Wow, thank you for the $20 donation. That's huge. And thank you for the puppy treats. So I've actually got 3 dogs here right now: Jaggy, Sweetie, and Shadow. And that really helps, because puppy treats are so expensive. I was actually looking at them. I was just like, man, oh man. And the worst thing is, even the cheaper treats, the old Roy and stuff like that, even those are getting expensive now. Like, it's just like, they're basically making it so that people can't invest into animals in the same way that they did. Even like the Purina Pro plan, stuff like that. It's just all these, 50-pound bags are just getting ridiculous now. So what I want to point out is that even if we had the right politician, the perfect politician, we still have to get people educated on essentially why these benefits, these Social Security benefits, are so good. And that's an uphill battle too, because, if you look at essentially what Social Security benefits are, they're a form of like capitalistic socialism, which is weird to say it that way, but it is. It's capitalistic socialism. The more you pay in, the more you get out, right? That's the idea, right? And people would say, well, socialism is evil and blah, 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 and so on and so forth. And they'll argue that. But the reality is that if anything bad happens to you, you're going to become a big fan of disability benefits, because you got injured and now you can't make your own way. You can't choose that new path. That's something that a lot of people don't realize when it comes to disability benefits, is that, like, none of these people chose to be on disability benefits in the sense of they wanted that life. Like, women and men, they're not sitting there going like, oh, this is amazing that I get a check now and health insurance. They would much rather not need the health insurance. They would much rather, live like all those other people out there that have a job, because then they can earn more. So, right off the bat, and most people don't know that. Remember when that one nonprofit came out with that video about like, SSI benefits, the program that America forgot. And then I made that one video where basically I said, that was a terrible title that they made, that nobody forgot what SSI benefits were. It's literally like nobody's been educated on it. Nobody knows what SSI benefits are until they absolutely land in the lap of them, because they need them, because they have no other choice. And so, the bottom line was, I then saw with their next video where they uploaded it, they changed the title of it to like, the program that like the government forgot or whatever, which is much more accurate for essentially what we were looking at with that. And so what I think has to happen is we need the following items. We need, number one, education in our schools about what Social Security benefits are. Number two, we need basically, which is weird too, because you would think with this administration, which is much more left leaning, which is much more into socialism / communism / that ideology, you would think that schools, would be presenting a lot of information on social insurance, right? Something bad happens, we got you covered because you paid in. Instead, their main faculty, their main point is basically a lot of this social justice, racial triggering, historical racial, difficulties and the problems, etc. Their agenda is not social insurance; it's more racial stuff, which I thought was very interesting. Which to me, I still don't understand why it's that. I still haven't figured out what the real goal of that is, even if it's what everybody's saying it should be. So at the end of the day, schools have to teach social insurance. They have to teach basic law, social insurance. What's going on? Why do we have it? Why is it good? All that stuff. We have to have a politician who becomes famous and supported by the people that also has the intention of specifically supporting social insurance. We have to have a group of attorneys who file a class action lawsuit to change the averaging algorithms to be pro-claimant and put in there that they cannot be changed for so many years. We have to have basically a Social Security Administration that is headed by a pro-SSA, or rather a pro-claimant, group that is not pro-SSA. Because a lot of these commissioners that come in, if there's a procedural item like in the POMS, procedural handbook, that's pro-claimant, they'll make it pro-SSA. We do not want more pro-SSA. We want more pro-claimant, even if it costs them more. We want people to have more rights. We want them to stop removing the rights of the people. Sadly, we also need those in the Social Security Administration to have more education too, because they're pissed off because people call in and scream at them and yada yada because there's not enough money and people are desperate and it's terrible. So at this point, those are the things we really need. Yeah, we don't need any more celebrity politicians. What we need, frankly, are people who are solid on capitalism, economy, social programs, and we need to control our immigration problem. Like, if you guys don't think that the immigration problem is a big deal, imagine how many people will be added onto SSI benefits through the 7-year program for refugees and immigrants, and how many millions, potentially billions, that's going to cost our general taxation fund when we're already running a deficit every year, even though we've stopped our war in the Middle East. Like, it's just something that puts more weight on it. And remember, when the immigrants come into America, a lot of those jobs that traditionally would be over the table get under the table workers. And those under the table workers, they mess up the system in the sense of paying in. And then they become a financial burden on the system when they're older and can't work and have to go into SSI benefits, which is why I have that other idea about letting them earn taxes while they can, if they can pay taxes on, essentially earnings that are under the usual threshold. I think that's a really good idea. But anyways, I'm just reading what the comments are real quick. Okay, so John Toomey, what you said there, we need to cut people who are using drugs and drawing a check until they can sober up and follow the doctor's treatment. So here's the thing with the drug users and the drug abusers. Basically, the drug users and drug abusers don't have control over their use and abuse. They're going to use drugs whether they have money coming to them or they don't have money coming to them, and they have to go out and basically, ask cars for money. And so the problem inherent with that is that, yeah, I get it, but if you cut their benefits, you've essentially done they're still going to do exactly what they're doing. You have to, and this is going to sound terrible, but you have to restrict those people who are drug users kind of in almost like a prison-like setting so that they are unable to use and abuse for a certain amount of time so that they can get off of drugs. And then from there, go ahead and continue forward with their benefits. Sometimes having back pay build up during that time. People say it's a horrible idea. I think it's a great idea because then they can rent a place, get a car, and get their life back on track. But I hear you. People don't like that people basically use drugs and are on benefits. But if you look past the reality of drugs are bad, government funds are being used to buy drugs, how dare you, how dare you, how dare you? If you get past that, then what you kind of come to is this world where you realize these people are going to do it anyways. Like, there's no way to stop a drug user from not using drugs whether they have money in their pocket or they don't. They're still going to have to use drugs. Let me scroll up here real quick. Okay, so Marjan, if I get an attorney to help out in my state, can I have them call you if everyone here gets one attorney from their state to help out? Yeah, absolutely. The whole idea here is get all the attorneys that we can together to go ahead and build the briefs and the motions. And remember, when this ultimate thing comes down, they may require, because of the level of it, a lot of interactions or a mega brief to be written that ultimately sorts out each argument mathematically as to why there is an abuse of the cost of living adjustment, why these averaging algorithms that the SSA has and uses are actually built in a negative way towards the claimant and actually over time reduce their benefits. There are nonprofits too that we want to join onto this, that we want to get basically on board to change what's going on, because these nonprofits, they get funded to investigate this stuff. A lot of people don't realize that, because, you know, nonprofits got a really negative name over the past couple of years, but nonprofits exist for the most part as an entity to do some action and get a ton of research from that action. And the whole point of that is, you know, a lot of people think of like nonprofits as like, we're saving tigers and bears and whatever. Yeah, that's the animal side. But then most nonprofits they're basically doing some action in the attempt to study it to create better action in the future, you know, and that's what a lot of the big ones are, especially the heavy-handed funded ones that are in Washington, D.C. So, you know, any and all that we can get of those, absolutely crucial, absolutely important. Ultimately, at the end of the day, do I think this can happen? Yeah. But it is weird that it took me to go ahead and just proffer the idea. I am okay with people taking this thing and me not doing a single bit of it, or me doing a ton of it, or whatever. I'm okay with any swing of that movement. But I'll tell you this, I can't do unlimited amounts because, you know, today I'm off because it's a federal holiday. It's, you know, the 2nd of January, which counts as the official New Day federal holiday. But otherwise, I'm sitting in a chair doing phone calls the entire day. I'm either in hearings, or I'm writing up briefs, or I'm submitting motions, or I'm responding to claimants, etc. So, you know, there's that side of it too. All right. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys are doing well. I will catch you a little bit later. I might be doing one more video. I might not. Have to see what's going on. I have to correct something that I said in one of the prior videos, because I said that quarter coverage was $1,470. It's not. It's $1,640. Because the $1,470 is the ceiling, the SGA. So I said that figure incorrectly in the other video. But anyways, I will catch up with you guys a little bit later. Thank you for being a part of the show. That was absolutely amazing. We did some really good thinking here. Basically, many of us who are disabled are capable of working because of our disability. I'm not sure, Mad Hatter, what happened. Let me see if I can scroll up here. I'm not giving my full benefits, so therefore you cannot just drop all SSIP. This is not the way to handle it. Okay. I guess Mad Hatter is talking about somebody who said that we should drop all SSI people. Obviously, we can't drop all SSI people. And a lot of SSDI people and SSI people, they're disabled, so they can't work at all. Or if they could work, it would be like 1 hour a week, you know, which I'm open to. Like, if we can create like a bunch of like procedures and legal systems that allow people who are disabled to not be restricted in that 1 hour that they work a week, like, I'm all for it. I am all for it. Like, I want to get as many disabled people back and doing work. And it's not even just the financial thing. It's if you don't work, you slowly degrade internally because there's no purpose or schedule or thing that you have to hit to get done for that week, that day, that whatever. So I'm all for it. I mean, giving opportunities to people to do something of worth, of purpose. And a lot of people think, oh, you just want them to go work at McDonald's for an hour. McDonald's doesn't need somebody for an hour. What places need for an hour are, those non-profity types of places that need some animal fed, or need, basically some, thing to be written up, or something to be responded to on some program. Like, that's what we need. So anyways, guys, I will catch you a little bit later. You have a wonderful, wonderful day. I hope you're well, and we'll go from there. All right. I'll catch you later. Bye-bye, guys. Bye-bye.